5 years ago, I was deciding between a Ferrari and a Lamborghini. Today, I'm deciding between rent and groceries. It's a choice that keeps you humble, let me tell you. I scraped my way up from nothing, built a real estate empire worth over $50 million, dollars, and then I lost every single dime. So this isn't another story about how to get rich. It's the opposite. This is the story of how having more money than I could ever imagine pushed me to the brink of homelessness. It's how one of the biggest financial flameouts you'll ever hear about taught me the most important lesson of my life. And it all started, like most things do, with a simple dream. I did not grow up with money, not even in the same zip code as money. My dad worked at a factory, my mom was a part-time waitress, and we lived in a small rental where the windows rattled every time the wind blew. I just remember this constant, low-grade hum of anxiety in our house. Anxiety about bills, about the car breaking down, about whether we could afford new school shoes. That feeling of being one bad day away from total disaster, it just never left me. My motivation wasn't greed, it was a deep, gnawing fear of insecurity. I swore to myself I would build a fortress of financial security so high that nothing could ever hurt my family again. Real estate was going to be my ticket out. I was stuck in a dead-end office job, but I spent every spare second I had reading books, going to seminars, and just studying the local market. I saved every penny. After 2 years, I finally had just enough for a down payment on a small, busted-up duplex on the worst street in town. My friends told me I was crazy. The place was a total wreck, but I saw something there. I spent every night and every weekend patching leaky pipes, laying new floors, painting walls. My own sweat was the only equity I had. 6 months later, I rented out both units. For the very first time in my life, I had a passive income stream. It wasn't much, but it was a start, and I was hooked. I refinanced that duplex and immediately used the cash to buy 2 more properties. That was the magic of it, right? The beautiful, seductive power of leverage. Back then, in the early 2000s, the banks were practically throwing money at you. The housing market was a rocket ship. I felt like I'd found the cheat code to life. My portfolio just exploded. 2 properties turned into 4, 4 became 16, and pretty soon, I wasn't just buying duplexes. I was scooping up apartment buildings, commercial spaces, and raw land. I was absolutely insatiable for the next deal. I moved faster, took bigger and bigger risks. My life completely transformed. That fortress I dreamed of, it was real now. We had a 10,000 square foot custom mansion with an infinity pool overlooking the city, a collection of luxury cars, a private jet on standby, a portfolio valued at over $50 million. I'd done it. I had beaten the fear from my childhood. I thought I was untouchable. I thought I was a king. But any kingdom built on a shaky foundation is going to crumble. The first tremor was so small I almost missed it. It was 2007. I was in a meeting with my bankers about another huge acquisition. One of them casually mentioned a slight tightening in the credit markets and a rise in subprime mortgage defaults. I brushed it off. It sounded like background noise, a problem for the little guys. I was playing in a different league. My portfolio was a work of art, a perfectly tuned machine. What I didn't get, what I couldn't see, was that my entire machine was built on cheap debt. I was leveraged to the absolute hilt. Every single asset was collateral to borrow more money to buy the next one. It worked like a charm on the way up, creating explosive growth. But it was also creating a hidden, catastrophic risk. I was arrogant. I honestly believed my success was because I was a genius, not because I was riding the biggest housing bubble in modern history. I ignored the warning signs because seeing them would have meant the party was over. The real tipping point came when the adjustable rate mortgages started to reset. Those were the loans that had fueled the whole boom. Start with a low teaser rate that eventually jumps to a much higher, often unaffordable, payment. Suddenly, my tenants, many of whom got apartments with flimsy credit checks, started missing rent. First it was a trickle, then it was a flood. The rental income that was supposed to service my mountain of debt began to dry up. Then I got the call I'll never forget. It was from the bank that held the loans on my biggest apartment complexes. With the global credit markets in a full-blown panic, they were calling my loans. See, there were clauses, covenants, tied to the property values. When those values fell, it triggered a default. They had the right to demand their money back. All of it. Immediately, it was a domino effect. One bank's panic forced another's. The same people who had toasted my success were now the ones sealing my tomb. The whole house of cards, built on the idea that property values only go up and credit is always cheap, was coming down. The fall isn't like you see in the movies. It's not one big dramatic event. It's a slow, grinding, soul-crushing process of losing everything, piece by agonizing piece. It began with the foreclosure notices. They came in these thick, official-looking envelopes, one after another, like soldiers taking over my territory. Each one was a property I had once celebrated, now just turning to ash in my hands. To stop the bleeding, I started selling everything. First went the land I'd planned to develop, but the market was completely dead. Nobody was buying. I had to sell for massive losses. Then came the personal stuff. The Ferrari was first. I remember watching it being driven away. It wasn't sadness for a car. It was the cold, terrifying realization that this was real. The watches, the art, my wife's jewelry. We sold it all just to make payroll for the handful of employees I had left and to pay the lawyers. The hardest day by far was losing our home. The mansion, my fortress, the big shining symbol that I had finally made it. I remember walking through the empty rooms after the movers were gone, the sound of my footsteps echoing, a lonely sound in a place that used to be so full of life. We moved into a small, two-bedroom apartment, about the same size as the one I grew up in. The irony was just suffocating. But that wasn't rock bottom. Rock bottom was the day I stood in line at a food pantry. My credit cards were cut off, bank accounts frozen, and we had no money for food. I was wearing a $1,000 suit because it was one of the few things I had left, and I was just standing there, head down, praying nobody would recognize me, waiting for a box of free food. The shame was a physical thing. I built a $50 million empire, and I couldn't even feed my own family. The king was officially a beggar. That night, I just sat in my car and stared into the dark, thinking about the unthinkable. I wasn't just broke. I was spiritually and emotionally bankrupt. What I went through was a special kind of hell, but the lessons I learned down there in the fire are the reason I'm able to tell you this story today. If you want to understand the mindset that got me out of that hole and how to make sure this never happens to you, then subscribe. Because what I'm going to share next is the most valuable asset I have left. The climb out didn't start with some brilliant business idea. It started with humility. It started with me taking a job doing manual labor for a construction crew, making $12 an hour. Swallowing my pride was the hardest thing I've ever done. Guys I used to do deals with would drive by in their nice cars, and I'd just keep my head down and keep swinging the hammer. But something strange happened during those long, hard days. The noise in my head, it started to get quiet. For the first time in years, I wasn't obsessing over interest rates or cap rates. I was just focused on the task right in front of me. Slowly, I started to see a way forward. I realized my real wealth was never the money. It was the knowledge. I had learned the real estate business from the ground up, and then from the top down. I knew how to spot a good deal, but now, more importantly, I knew exactly how a deal goes bad. I started a tiny consulting business right from my kitchen table. I didn't help people get rich quick. I helped regular families and small-time investors make smart, safe moves. I taught them what not to do. I warned them about the dangers of too much leverage and the critical importance of having cash reserves. My first client paid me $200. It felt like a million. It was real money. It was earned. Today, my life looks nothing like it did at the peak. I don't have the mansion or the fancy cars. We live in a modest house we can actually comfortably afford. But the fear is gone. That deep childhood fear that drove me to build that fragile kingdom. It's been replaced by a quiet confidence. I lost a $50 million portfolio, but I found myself. I learned that real security isn't a fortress of assets. It's resilience. It's integrity. It's the love of your family. And that's a kind of wealth that no market crash can ever take away from you.